yourself, because some students will have seen your video that you kindly sent over for us. Some of the students who were on the startup program will have heard a little bit about you, because our speaker on Tuesday actually had a bit of a story about you, and I'll tell you a little bit about that in the session. But yeah, if you could kindly start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, briefly starting from kind of when you left school up until like your role now as the head of sales at Unlimited magazine.
Okay. Hi everyone. Nice to meet in a way. Yeah. So leaving school, frighteningly, that's about 20 odd years ago now, which makes me feel a bit upsetting. I've just celebrated my 40th birthday, which is just really sort of quite upsetting. I'm starting to get grey hairs. So I, from leaving school, I mean, I'm telling the classic story, I suppose. I've never really known what I want to do when I grow up, and I still haven't quite worked that one out yet. So I never really knew what I wanted to do. I mean, the one thing I suppose that I realized reasonably early on was that I didn't want to do any of the things that I kind of enjoyed for a living, because the things that I enjoy started not being fun when I start doing them for money and being forced to sort of deliver on them. So I suppose that's kind of been one of my plans, is to not do the things that I enjoy. The things that I enjoy are hobbies, and that's how I use them. So I certainly the start of my career was just sort of trying different things and seeing what I liked. And the thing that clicked for me really was selling. I enjoyed sales, and a lot of people hear that they don't like that side of a business. They find sales as being really sort of like high pressure, intense, and I think a lot of people are given a formula for selling. But I never really kind of adapted to that. The thing that I always sort of quite enjoyed about it was just meeting people and talking to people. So I started off in retail. I joined Vodafone at the height of the sort of pay-as-you-go boom. And quite embarrassingly, my first year of employment with them at sort of 22 was the most I've ever earned in 1 year. To this day, where all I did was sit at a desk and scan boxes of pay-as-you-go phones. But every single one that was scanned was I used to earn £9 commission for. So that was the most I've ever earned in 1 year in my life back when I was 22. And that's how I got into it. I mean, you don't earn that sort of money for it anymore. So anyone thinking about going and working for a phone shop these days, don't bother. It doesn't pay as well these days. But I stayed with Vodafone for quite a long time. I was there for 13 years, sort of in a series of different roles. I went into management, but if I'm dead honest, I didn't enjoy managing. I preferred being on the coalface and selling to people. And I think management took me out of that, and it's a different skill set. And I think sometimes there's a temptation in a lot of businesses to promote their best salespeople into management roles. And I don't think that's the best place for a salesperson. I think a good salesperson should be perfectly happy selling, and can bring that to them. So I did that, and I stepped back eventually, and I went back to the shop floor and eventually into business sales, where I first started selling directly to business, so the corporate market rather than individuals on the high street. From that, I eventually left. I was spending a lot of time working away from home, so I wanted to get back a little bit more local, and I ended up going back into retail and working for Goldsmiths, the jewellers, selling luxury watches. Again, that was a commission-based role, so I did that for a couple of years and really enjoyed it, and sort of through that became aware of the local Chamber of Commerce in Sheffield. Then noticed there was a role going there, joined them, and that integrated me very much into the corporate world outside of phone sales, so not what I worked with before where I met an awful lot of people. I mean, the structure of the Chambers of Commerce is about networking and meeting people and doing business between businesses. And that's really how I kind of fell into what I'm doing now, which is Unlimited magazine was one of my clients. I work with them a lot, and when their previous head of sales left, they approached me and asked me if I'd like to join. That's how I got it. I had no ambitions to work in publishing whatsoever, but I think by virtue of the people that I've known and got on with, this is where I've come to. And head of sales sounds like I've got some kind of responsibility. I haven't. That's a lie. But I am responsible for my own strategy, so my only job really is to make money for the company that I work for.
Yes.
That's it.
Thank you for sharing that with us. You gave us a really good insight into kind of your journey so far. So what is it that you currently do in your role then? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's most of our products are free magazines. So they're distributed free, and they're distributed, well, the one I work on mainly is Unlimited. That's the magazine. And this goes direct to local businesses. So we want that to be read by businesses, so everything in there is relating to business news. We also work on, I don't know, people might be a bit more familiar with this one, Expose magazine. This is kind of aimed at students and young people. Again, same thing, it's a free magazine, but it advertises pubs, restaurants, bars, places that students might be interested in. Obviously, that's been really, really difficult over the past 12 months. We also work on cookbooks. We are a publisher, but we primarily sort of focus on doing cookbooks. And it's a similar strategy, to be honest. We sell into the books before we publish them. So, for example, you might see this one around Sheffield. This is the Little Book of Sheffield. It's a really nice little guide to a lot of the independent businesses around the city. So it's got a really good purpose, especially at the moment. But essentially what we ask is anyone that's in there, we ask if they want to buy a chapter, which we charge for, which essentially pays for the project before we publish it. So at that point, we then have books to sell at a profit. So it's paid for all its costs. We can then sell the books by the usual methods, so Waterstones, Amazon, local retailers, and every time we sell those, it's pure profit. So we know at that point we've already broken even before we can go to press, essentially. So it's a slightly unique model that we use on everything, but it's never charging the consumer. It's all about sort of charging the advertising people who appear in it.
So that is kind of a unique model, isn't it? But coming back to kind of your career, it sounds like you have always stayed within like the business environment and selling. So how would you describe persuasive communication? And would you say that there are different types or different ways of being persuasive?
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, persuasive communication is, I suppose, very much a purpose of now what I do on a academic level, as opposed to what I do on a sort of personal level. I've been through lots of sales training over the years, and I've found a lot of it irrelevant and not real. The very often coined phrase is "people buy from people," and I think if you're going into something with an agenda, I don't necessarily think that you do get the best outcome of it, and certainly that's how I find that works for me right to this day. I think you've got to try and find out about people to find out how you can help them. So I mean, persuasive communication, it sounds quite academic, but I think for me, on a personal level, it's much more about working out what you have in common and how you can work together. I think on a more practical level now, what we do with the magazine is a classic marketing strategy. So it's about finding a way to communicate and persuade people to use our customers. Because I'm quite active and because we've got quite a small pool of people that we work with, I'm able to, rather than just put them in a magazine and hope that someone buys an advert, like you perhaps see with like McDonald's, Coca-Cola, it's like we work to help present our customers in a way that won't make them attractive to the people reading the magazine. And I'm very honest about it. That's an ongoing process. What will work for a web designer will not necessarily work for a wholesaler or something like that. So, and I don't purport to be an expert on that. Like, I'm not a marketing expert. We're an outlet, but we do work with people sort of gradually over sort of usually several months to work out what resonates better and what people will respond to. I mean, social media gives you a brilliant way of gauging that. The more likes and retweets that you get of something, you can tell how well it's resonating. So persuasive communication, I'm sure there is people who can talk about it much better on that front when it comes to actually marketing and things like that. But for me, it's about being able to relate to people, understand them, find out what their needs are, which sometimes as well people aren't as upfront as that as you expect them to be. And sometimes people just don't know themselves. Sometimes people haven't thought about it. But you've got to have a conversation that has enough depth to it to get the nitty gritty of what they will need and require to convince them to spend money with you. That's my ultimate goal. That's what I want to do.
So like you said then, so kind of understanding, you know, what their needs are, identifying those, and then would you say it's like shaping perhaps then what you have so it meets them, or would you feel like it has to be the right fit?
Yeah, no, I mean, well, there are going to be people who are just not going to be your customers, and you've kind of got to work out who they are and who they aren't. I mean, even going right back to when I was working in the phone shops, if someone, this is really crude and really honest, but if someone came in wanting the cheapest deal, I wasn't interested in them as a customer. I wanted someone that wanted demonstrate value, and I mean, frankly, if you're taking it to the ultimate level, if they don't pay their bills, you end up getting that commission taken back off you. So it's very easy sometimes to convince someone that they wanted something, but if they didn't pay the bill for it and it wasn't really what they wanted, you could lose that commission.
Yeah.
So I think it's you've got to be upfront, and you've got to be able to make sure they're going to be the right customer for you before you step into that. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a degree of working out if they have an actual interest and if they are going to benefit from what you do. And I think you've got to be upfront and honest with yourself. You do hear people say everyone is a potential customer. I don't agree with that. Certainly not in the jobs that I've had. I think it's important to work out who could be and work with them to find a way that they can benefit from what we do. Most of the time we work that out. Sometimes we try something and it doesn't work. There's a couple of people that I've worked with because we do get on. They've tried to work with us, and we've tried to work with them, but they've just not seen a commercial benefit from it. So I'm upfront about that, and it's what we've done has just not been successful, if I'm honest. So we step away and we stay on good terms, and if we can work out a way of doing something in the future, we will do. But you can't, even with the best will in the world, you can't make everything you do be successful. So you've got to work out where that is, and that's communication.
Yeah, and it sounds like honesty there is something that you've touched on quite a lot. It's all about being sort of upfront and honest. And something else that you mentioned was trying to work out whether or not they are the right kind of fit. How do you go about doing that, working out whether someone is right or not?
For me, it starts on a personal level.
Yeah.
Like what drew me into sales was meeting people and working with people. And the first part of that is really pretty simply, do I like them, and would I like to work with them?
Yeah.
There are then people who, yes, you know what, we get on great, but there's no crossover in terms of what we do, so there's never going to be a commercial benefit to either of us by doing that. And I think there's plenty of people that we know who wouldn't benefit from that. But then there's changing in terms of what people will want from a business. Some people will want an immediate commercial return, for example, and they'll need to see sales coming in from what we do. But marketing and PR is a big side of it too. Sometimes people just want to be recognised and be acknowledged, and that's where you can hone in a little bit more on the people that are behind it and tell their story. And that's I think PR is an important side of it, because PR doesn't have an immediate commercial return. But there's nothing wrong with showing off a little bit. And the products that we do actually do give our businesses a chance to sort of say, you know what, we've had a really successful year and we want people to know about that. I don't think that's an immediate win, but I mean, that adds to perhaps what they'll do 1, 2, 3, 4 years down the line, because they're showing that they are successful. They are. So working out that angle is a really important part of it, I think.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. It does. Yeah. So what factors then do you think are important when you are kind of selling something or trying to get someone to do something? What factors are important to consider?
Can they pay? Will they pay? Is it worth the deal? No,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
sometimes I'm still guilty of this these days. Sometimes in putting so much work into such a small contract that you because you really want that, you want to do it. And I mean, I think sometimes you've got to be honest with yourself and say, you know what, it isn't worth the time and input. Investing in this one deal. You've got to sort of spread yourself wider and be able to reach more. So that's a degree. Can they pay the deserved amount of time that it's going to require is an important one. B is probably, yeah, are they going to appreciate it? Are you going to have more complexity down the line? And how we do that, I think, is the important thing. If you want to work together, you've got to be able to find a way that's going to work for both parties. So I think persuasive communication is more a negotiation rather than a statement of we will do this. It's more of we're going to try this, and if that doesn't work, let's come back to it and do it slightly differently. But if there's a will to continue, then we'll get there. So it's not. I think a negotiation. It's probably better. Can I change the name of the talk?
Just scrap it. We'll just scrap
negotiating. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, I think getting to that point, but finding the right way to do it is not necessarily persuading people in the same way as finding exactly what's going to work for people, and that both parties want to go forward with that. If you're creative enough in terms of your approach, you'll find a way of doing it, and I think that is going to get the goal that I want. So I don't look at it perhaps as much as persuading, but negotiating.
Yeah. And I think that kind of brings us on nicely actually to our next question, because from kind of doing the sessions and speaking to lots of employers, something which is I've certainly recognised is like the importance of like your network and the relationships that you have with people. So the next question is it more important to kind of be persuasive and get what you want? Say if you have, for example, targets that you have to hit, or a deal that you have to make, or is it better to kind of, like you say, negotiate and kind of stay friends and keep the peace? Or do you kind of, focus solely on what you want?
Targets are really important. You've got to aim towards something all the time, and it's I'm quite target driven myself, so this last year has been quite a sort of challenge for me, in able to take stock. A lot of the advice that you're hearing from a lot of people is take stock, relax. There's a lot of people going through the same thing. I find that really, really difficult because I am quite hungry to bring in sales and acquiring new customers at the moment. I mean, this is where I suppose I say the things I said earlier, the will has kind of been taken away a lot. Certainly in the early stages of the pandemic, and then to a degree in the last few months as well. A fatigue sets in where, weirdly, even the businesses that are doing really well don't want to spend money. They don't want to advertise in the same way because they don't want to show off. Every marketing book you'll ever read will tell you keep marketing in times of trouble and bad economic situations, because that's when you can get really noticed. But people on a personal level don't. I found in this last 12 months, they really have drawn away from it. So I found the last 12 months really challenging, and being able to sit back and not get frustrated. So I would love to have sold more than we've been able to, like genuinely, like. And I think, frankly, for one of our magazines, we rely almost exclusively on the hospitality industry, which isn't there right now. No one's going to advertise a restaurant that's not open. There's literally no point in that. So that's really frustrating. And then, so we tried to find ways of other things we can work on. And that's kind of how the Little Book of Sheffield came about, actually. So that was okay. The magazines have a shelf life of 1 month. Could we produce something that actually had a shelf life that's going to last a little bit longer? So on a commercial level, that's how this product was created. It was okay. Yes, the magazines might disappear after a month, but this will stay, and this can still be something. This is still relevant in a year's time. So that's how we came out. So we tried to come up with a different idea for it. I want to keep selling, and I want to get deals in, but it's not worth damaging a future relationship to do so. Longevity is more practical, and ultimately your life gets easier if those relationships are long standing, because you'll be able to go back to them and work with them again in the future. So perhaps while I could be a bit more pushy, and I've been tempted to be a bit more pushy and call in favors to get people to work with us a little bit more over the past 12 months. Ultimately, I think when things are returning back to normal, which I'm still hoping they're going to get there sort of reasonably soon now, I really think we'll be able to capitalise on that. And a lot of the goodwill that we've built up in offering promotion free of charge, for example, we've offered a lot of people news in the magazine, features in the magazine, to talk about what's been happening to them. Free. We created a pay-as-you-go advertising campaign at one point, which is just to tell us what you want to spend. I had some people sort of offering us more than we would normally sell the advertising for when we offered them the choice of how much they pay. Whereas at the same time, we were putting out ads for a fraction of what we'd normally charge for it. So we just took whatever we could get and we banked the goodwill that I think that we've created during that time. So, I mean, some people have helped us out, so it's come good. And we've helped other people out, and I believe that will come good. So from my own opinion, there is a degree of, you've still got to be visible and you've still got to be asking those questions if they want to do the work with you. But if the answer is not right now, don't jeopardize a relationship that could be more resolute in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. That completely makes sense. And it just goes to show how important kind of relationships are. So thank you for sharing that with us. And so you've shared with us your career history, and it sounds like you've worked in kind of various different roles, from, retail to, what you're doing now, working in publishing. And I wondered whether you've had any kind of sort of persuasive communication role models that you've tried to emulate. So do you know any like managers that you've worked with or colleagues that you've perhaps saw that are really good at selling or something? And if you have, kind of, what was it that you thought was good about them and why?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, when I read that question, I tried to come up with sort of like a really clever answer. I was like, oh yeah, Dale Carnegie, How to Make Friends and Influence People. But I'll be honest, I've never read it. I know the highlights.
I love your honesty.
So yeah. Do you know what? Most of my communication sort of icons probably stand-up comedians. I'd really like. I think it's a really interesting way of communicating and delivery and having a bit of intonation. I mean, okay, so I have a naturally boring voice, right? Let's say it's quite dull, like it's deep and it's monotone. And even getting sort of any sort of difference in that is quite difficult sometimes with the voice that I've just naturally been blessed with. I think stand-up comedy is quite an interesting way of how you can make yourself more interesting to listen to, because it's about pitch, it's about sort of how you deliver lines, and hopefully this has not been too bland. So you can judge for yourselves whether I've been successful on that or not. And then, yeah, on a personal level, I've worked with many people over the years, great salespeople that could, I mean, it's an off-coin phrase, but could sell snow to Eskimos. But the one thing that I think all the best salespeople have had in common is being likable. And sometimes it's genuine and sometimes it's fake. And sometimes amending how you are around people, being able to sort of communicate with people from different cultures, different classes, is really important. But I think the people who I've admired the most can talk to anyone. They can have a chat to a random old bloke in the pub that's like 60, 70 years older than them, or they can relate to an 11-year-old. And I think that's kind of where I like to try and pitch myself. I can talk to my nephew about Fortnite till the cows come home, but equally I'm able to have a discussion about left-wing politics of the 1970s with my sort of incredibly political great uncle. And that's where I think, and I think sadly, if I'm honest as well, and this is just supposed to be a lecture a lot of young people, which is a bit embarrassing of me, but communication these days is done so much more digitally. And I think retail jobs, I mean, the loss of dividends this last week is really sad, because I think jobs like that and a part-time role where you are exposed to a lot of different people is really, really important in getting that experience of talking to people, because the actual ability to hold a conversation with different people who you would never normally meet outside your circle of friends is really, really important. And I mean, to any young person, I would say, take yourself out of your comfort zone. Get a job in a pub when they're open again. Get a job in retail, but expose yourself to people that you're not normally going to meet. Because if the only person you can talk to is your mates, that's going to be hard. And it's amazing the amount of people that you're meeting more and more who will hide behind email and not want to talk on the phone, on even a video call. But yeah, I think real communication where you can actually judge people and genuinely get a sense of like, do I like this person? Do they someone that I'm going to get on my level? I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had a masterclass last week, and we looked at different theories of like persuasive communication, and one of them was just simply be likable and be friendly, because a lot of the time people buy into that, don't they?
And you can lie about that.
Yeah.
You don't need to, there is nothing wrong with being nice to someone that you might not like that much. You don't need to be abrasive. If someone says something you don't necessarily agree with, you don't need to disagree with them because they have a different viewpoint on life. Everyone has different experiences. And it's interesting to hear those. And I think weirdly, in sort of social media platform, people are really, really forthcoming and viewing their grievances at people these days. I don't think it's necessarily like it. Genuinely, I think if someone says something that you don't agree with, I don't think it's the right thing to pull them up on it or whatever. I think it's more interesting to listen to them to try and work out why they feel that. I'm getting preachy now, I'm sorry.
No, I think it's really interesting that you did bring up kind of like social media, because like you said, that is, one of the main ways that people communicate now, isn't it? And so not only is it about how you present yourself in person, but also how you present yourself online. And, employers nowadays do kind of look on social media if, as part of like the job application process. So, if you're not being kind on the internet, it does say a lot about you, doesn't it? So I think that was a really important point that you made, actually. So yeah, moving on then to our next question. So what are your top tips then for kind of being persuasive or getting a sale that you've learned throughout your career?
One is I've covered far more than enough, which is be likable, be nice, give people the time of day. That's the first and that's the foremost. But the second one is just really, really simple, which is closing a sale, asking people if they want to do business with you. I think when I was working in retail, it was the side that a lot of people really struggled with, which is saying, we're going to do this then, like try and move it forward. But that moment of, right, can we sort this out? Are we going to do it? There's so many ways, and there's a lot of different techniques to closing a sale. But ultimately, just saying, right, are we gonna do this? Like, are we ahead? I think a lot of people find that uncomfortable. But I mean, I'm very upfront about my goals, which is that I want people to spend money with me. And I don't think I go into a conversation without people knowing that at some point they're going to get asked for that.
Yeah.
It might not be right there and then, it might be down the line, but yeah, be honest about it. Like, it is business, it is work. And although I do stuff like without getting paid to be nice, it ultimately has to come back. So yeah, don't be shy of saying, are you going to spend money with me? Just say no. That's where you can sort of gather that.
Yeah, so I used to work in a clothes shop, and it's a bit awkward. Like, even it was just a clothes shop, and sometimes I find it a bit awkward where I was trying to kind of sell something to someone, but I would never want to say like, oh, shall I put this behind the till? So what kind of, I guess, strategies could you suggest then for someone who perhaps isn't, that confident of just asking outright? What have you got? Any kind of tips that you could share?
I mean, if you're going to get clever about it, yeah, there's lots of different ways and language tricks that you can sort of utilize in terms of, shall we pop this behind, and framing your words differently. There's lots of different closing techniques, and by and large, I don't think they're very valuable. I can't give advice to people. I'm not like, whatever works for you, but just say like, yeah, do you want it? Do you want to buy this?
Yeah.
Are you buying what I'm selling?
Yeah. I guess then you get the answer, don't you? Either yes or no, don't you? And then you don't have to spend any more time, I guess, if you know that the person's not interested.
There's lots of different tools to do that. Google it if you're really interested.
Google's your answer. Thank you for that. And so, a lot of young people or students who are here with us today, or even, do you know, if they go for like a job interview, which might be in like business or sales, or even like another area of work, you usually get asked to try and sell something on the spot, don't you? So if someone was to ask you the famous question, like, sell me this pen, how would you go about answering that question?
So my answer, based on what I've said today, would be get them to explain why they want a new pen, and that would do it. The best answer I know is this is one that was used on me. I don't think the person that did it did it, but yeah, I asked that in an interview once, and someone said to me, "You need a new pen, mate."
Quite clever.
Yeah,
you would need a new pen then.
Yeah, that's just a pencil. I don't want to break one of my pens because I'll use good pens.
So it's just about getting them to understand why they would want that pen, basically, maybe describing the benefits, or
if they don't want a pen, there's no point having a conversation, is there? So get them to tell you if they want a pen.
Finding out why, or
they can tell you why they want it, but yeah, find out why if they need to write something down, they're going to need a pen, aren't you?
I like it. And our final question then, before we hand over to students. So looking back on what you've learned in your career, what is the best advice you could give our students, just in general? So not necessarily about, selling or, communicating, but just in general, what is the best advice kind of reflecting on your career and what you've learned?
Be persistent. Like, it's in a world so much of emails these days as well, it's very easy to ignore someone. So if people don't reply to your email, just keep sending them, check in. Don't make them, you can spend forever writing a really clever email, but you can also just send a really short one and say, how you doing? Do you want to pick up on what we discussed? And 2 lines does it a lot easier sometimes than I think a lot. I get lines and lines of emails of someone pitching me how great they are and what they can do, and I read the first bit of it and it's gone. So I think just checking in with people and being persistent and making sure they know you're there when they might want you again is really important. And don't think people are being rude by not replying, because actually, again, in the world that we're living in right now, everyone's incredibly busy, incredibly stressed, and picking up on a lot of things. So don't take that to heart too much. I do, but it's a fault. I'm aware of it. Be available. Be nice. Let people know that they can reach you on the phone at any time. Try and speak to people more. Like try and communicate in person as much as possible. It is really important. But stick to your guns. Have ethics. Be someone that people will want to work with repeatedly. Because if people want to work with you, they will try and find a way of doing it. A lot of the business that I've done is from customers who I might not have thought were right for what we're doing. But if people like what we're doing and they like what they see, they'll try and be a part of it. They'll want to be part of the gang, so to speak. And I think certainly with Unlimited Magazine, it's very much a gang, and the people that pay money to be in it are people that want to be part of that. So be one that people want to work with, and the business will probably come to you reasonably naturally.
Yeah, so sort of it's coming back to, again, isn't it, being likable, being someone that people actually want to work with. And I think being persistent is a really good one, because I know that I speak to some students sometimes, and they've had an email saying that they haven't got the job, or they're waiting to hear if they have got the job, and they don't call, and it's like, well, get in touch with them because they're probably just busy or something. It's really important that you be persistent, because like you said, people might not be ignoring you, they might just be really busy with their current job. So just come into the questions that we have got in the chat box then. So Catherine's put, and I think it's a good question, do you use the law of averages to close deals?
In what frame? As in throw enough muck at the wall and some of it will land? Like 100%. If you check in with 100 people and 10 come back to you say, yes, I'd like to talk more, that's creating those opportunities again. So yeah, there's I mean, there's pipeline theories around it, and it's just simple. It's an obvious thing, really. I mean, people make a lot more money than I do by explaining these sort of things in greater detail. I think it's just quite an obvious point that if you say to 100 people, do you want to give me a tenner? Like, if one says yes, then you're in with it. So yeah, creating more opportunities for yourself is really important. If you don't ask, you're never going to get.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So we've had a question from Steve. He's put, "This is great, Dan, and very interesting. What's your best ever sale?"
I've had some. So I don't know how I can say it. I closed a massive deal drunk at a party once. It was exactly that. It was it was. Someone mentioned how do I. I'm sure Steve knows who it is. But someone mentioned sort of drunkenly. Now how do I do this? And I was like, well, mate, you give me 10 grand and we sort it out. And the next morning, me not thinking a great deal about it, I got a phone call saying, can you come up today and we'll have a proper chat about that. I suppose the success on that part was I told them at that point what it was going to cost, and it was something they were willing to invest. So before I even went up there, they knew that they were happy to go ahead with it. So that is the best and easiest sale that I've ever taken part in. And yeah, I can't say it's my proudest moment, but it's certainly my best ever sale.
Oh, brilliant. So if you were to hire someone, what sort of qualities would you look for?
Someone genuine, someone with ethics, someone that I felt I would get on and work with. But you have also got to have experience or some sort of academic ability to back that up as well. I think for me, it's very much about the person. I think if you can hold a conversation, you could probably do what I do. It's not a complicated job, but you've got to have the will to stick your neck out a little bit. But yeah, there's also got to be an element of ability behind it as well. I talked earlier about how I didn't want to do what I liked doing for a job. It's probably slightly not true, because I mean, the thing I always enjoyed when I was at school and when I was at college was writing. I didn't like being given a subject to write around, but written communication, I suppose, in itself is an art. It's a skill. You learn it, you develop it. So I was good at English, and I suppose in that respect, I communicate that way. So perhaps I'm just contradicting everything I said about half an hour ago. So I apologise.
It's okay. Okay, so Nasreen's put, what do you like about your current role?
I love the autonomy. So I like my job. My job's like running a business for someone who doesn't have the nerve to actually own their own business. So I am given an awful lot of autonomy to do what I think will work, which enables me to try a lot of new things. Within the own parameters of what I do, it is down to me, and it's left to me to run Unlimited certainly itself as kind of my own project. So I love the autonomy, and I love what I can create with that. I love the people, and yeah, one of the biggest challenges for me over this last year is not being able to see people in person and meet them and spend time with them. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I'd never heard of it until a few years ago, but the concept of networking and going into meetings where you don't know anyone in the room and having to talk to them, it sounds horrendous, and sometimes it is. But there's a part of me that really enjoys meeting a room full of strangers and spending time with them. And I think it's a shame that you can't do that because there's online events like this, and people get together and communicate, but you can't form those relationships where you can be the person at the back sniggering about something stupid. That's been lost very much in the world that we've got at the moment, and I'm really looking forward for that to come back. So I love socialising. I do generally, as a rule, like people. There's not a lot of people that I dislike on most levels. Everyone's got something pretty cool about them, and if you can find that, then you'll be able to form a good relationship.
Real. And that, when I mentioned at the beginning that some of our guest speakers we run like a startup business program to help students start up their own business, and we had Andy Callard from Sheffield Hallam University, and he mentioned actually that you encouraged him to go to a network meeting, and he managed to get a video of Anthony Joshua for his son. So that was the story, and and he was saying, oh, Dan Laver, he encouraged me to go to a networking event, and I managed to get the video from my son, who was absolutely buzzing and thought I was dead cool for ages. So it was which I thought was really interesting. And it just goes to show, doesn't it, the power of networking, and you never know what might happen if you do take that step and go somewhere.
We did know what was going to happen with that, but we weren't allowed to formally announce it to the press. So basically what I did was ignore all that and tell everyone that you might want to come to this one because I think Anthony Joshua's going to be after it. So that was just, we knew that we were going to get some time with Anthony Joshua. Andy and a few other people, I did let the cat out of the bag and say, no, you want to go with this one, mate, it's going to be really good.
Okay, we've got a couple more questions coming in, and I think we'll stop there because there's been quite a few. So Tosh Bangi's put, when negotiating, what strategy can I use to pull the deal on my terms?
To pull the deal on your terms. So I'll just answer the question as I understand it. It's how much are they going to spend and what can you deliver for that? Because if they have a budget that will not pay for the work, there's no point. But find out what they're willing to spend, maximize it. So if you know their ceiling on it, you can give them an offering that covers their ceiling. With that, be ambitious. But I think it's a really good option to sort of go in with, here's what I would expect to get, and here's me pushing it. So over-egg it, I suppose, is the best way I can put it. If you give someone two options and say, and here's the one that you'd really like. So this is what you'd like them to spend, and this is what you're going to give them for that one. But then go in a bit higher as well. So go in with something that is more ambitious, that is sort of like saying, but say to them, this is better. This is better than what we're going to do at this level. And I think this one will work for you better. This one is great, but this one is better. If they go lower, you still won. That's what I do. Every time I send someone, I send them two options. I hope I don't have to try and sell anyone to any. Anyway, but you'll get two options. One is the one that I really want to do, and I think is where I want to be. But the higher one is just me saying, you know what, though, if we wanted to go all in and really go for it, this is what I'd do for you as well. And go that extra mile on that. Say this is me putting everything behind it. This is me giving you. I mean, in terms of the magazine, it's sort of like, well, okay, you could buy a page every month, and that'll give you really good exposure, and I'll charge a few £1,000 for that. But you know what? If you give me a bit more, I'll give you a cover, and you'll be everywhere. And that's adding something else to it. So it's saying, here's a little icing on top of that. If you really wanted to go help a level from it. My experience is probably 40 to 50% of people will go for the better one because they'll find it more exciting, and that passion will pay off.
Thank you. So a win-win situation there. And then we've got, what advice would you give me as a student who's starting a new business?
I mean, there's so many different terms of businesses, so I suppose that's quite a difficult thing to say. But the one thing that I suppose everyone needs to do is sell themselves and be someone that people are going to want to deal with. If you're selling cakes, make sure you know everyone who buys cakes. Do your research, find out who they are, and give them a ring. Find out about them. I mean, the students, you know what, you're in a really good position to find out about people, and people forget this as they get older as well, but it doesn't become irrelevant. Ask people to tell you about themselves. People love talking about themselves. I've just sat here for coming up to an hour and done it. And so anyone loves to be able to talk about themselves. So if you say to them, you know what, I'm potentially starting a business, I'm going to be working in your field. Can you come and tell me a little bit about yourself? Arrange that. Ask them to tell you, and people will be very honest when they get jabbering on. So ask them to tell you what they did, how they've done it, and the chances are, if you're talking to someone in the same field, they're actually going to be a contact that can help you, can buy from you, whatnot. But go into it without those ulterior motives, because then when you understand them a bit better, you'll be able to sort of say, you know what, actually, I could be a customer of mine. But they'll appreciate that, and they'll appreciate the fact that you took an interest in them.
And then we've got two last questions about the magazine. So we've got one, Adam's put, how many magazines do you develop? And then Kirsten's put, who is your main target audience?
So on Unlimited specifically, then I'll talk about this one directly. Our main audience for this is people who are in a business. So it's people working in the business world. So we want people to be reading the mag if they are interested in the business community of Sheffield. Business to business, it's a bit hidden, but I mean, it's probably the biggest sector, I think, in terms of most businesses need products from other businesses. So I'd say business to consumer and business to business, everyone falls within that. So we are looking at business to business sales, services, goods, products that can be sold to other people. So that's my main magazine. As a company, we're currently producing 3 magazines. So Unlimited is for business. Exposed is students and young people. We want you to go to this bar and buy a drink in it. That's ultimately what it comes down to. And we also produce one that's specifically for the Hillsborough area of Sheffield. So that's delivered through front doors and is advertising local shops, like so people that are literally around the corner, and local tradesmen, so plumbers, electricians. It's not glamorous, but they all make money on that basis. So does that answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that, let me just double check, that is all of the questions that have come through. So Dan, thank you so much for joining us. We feel so privileged to have had you come on and talk. It's been so insightful, but obviously you've brought lots of humour to it, and you've been very honest as well. So thank you. We really appreciate your time.
No, thanks, Laura. As I say, it's always nice to talk about yourself. So
as you've said. I love it. So in the chat box then, we're really keen to hear how these kind of sessions are going for you guys. So please feel free to, if you've got a spare 30 seconds to, hop on and tell us how you found it. And also next month, we've got some sessions on networking coming up, and hopefully something which has come through from today is how important networking and relationships are. So in the chat box, there will be links to book the tickets for our next session. So on the 4th of February, we have the Fiona Duncan Steer, who is going to be running a workshop on networking. And on the 25th of February, we've also got a masterclass on building connections as well. So please do book your tickets. They're not ones to miss. And if you need anything in the meantime, please don't hesitate to get in contact with the enterprise email address. But thank you all for joining. And Dan, there's lots of thank you comments in the chat box where students are saying thank you. So thanks again. We really appreciate your time.
No, pleasure. I hope it was borderline interesting.
Definitely, it definitely was. So thank you. And yeah, like I said, guys, that is the end of the session. But if you do have any questions, or you can't, for whatever reason, book your tickets, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Okay. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks, Dan. Take care.
Where is this recording saved? Sorry.
Pardon?
Where's this recording?